So in this section, we'll finish off our admin app by adding a users component. And this component will allow the admins to delete users and their associated comments and posts. So let's get started by creating a users.js component in our profile directory. And as always, we'll start with our imports. We'll need the usual imports, and we'll also need a table because that's what we will be displaying our users in. And then we also need a dialog box because when a admin clicks on a delete user button, we'll need to open up a dialog box to confirm the delete. And then we can just initialize our users component with an empty div. So in order to delete a user, we first have to get all the users from our database. And we'll do this in the component didMount lifecycle method and do it through our Axios get request. And of course, we'll set up the server and the SQL query after setting up our client side. So let's do axios.get, then /API/get/all users. And we do a dotted then statement, and then we save our users in the Redux state. So let's do res and then arrow function this.props.user success, which will again be our Redux action dispatch. And then we pass in res.data because again, similar to posts and comments, the actual user profile is stored in res.data. We don't need the entire response with HTTP headers and other properties we don't need. And then we can just do .catch and then our console.log error. Then we can set up our usual pattern for opening and closing a dialog box. So we need state, and then we'll set it to open and UID, and open will be false. And then UID is going to be the user ID. So again, we'll do the same thing we did for deleting posts. When a user opens a dialog box, the associated user ID is saved to the React local component state. So again, this just makes sure we're deleting the correct user, and they're doing it this way ensures that there can't be any accidental deletion. And then we do a helper method of handle click open and handle click close. And of course, these are just to open and close the dialog box. So now we have our handle delete user function. And this is going to be the most complex function in this entire course. So first I'll explain what we're doing, and then I'll go into great detail about why we're doing it. And remember, in this function, we're deleting the user and all their associated comments and posts automatically. So a admin should not have to manually delete all the user's posts and comments. They can just delete the user and delete their posts and comments automatically as well. So the first thing we do is get the user ID, and we'll just save it in a const called user_ID. So the very first thing we have to do actually is delete all the user comments. We can't directly just delete the user, as we'll see in a second. So what we do axios.delete /API/delete/user comments. And then we pass in the user ID, which will be used to look up all the comments the user made in our database. We do a .then statement, and then we call another axios.get request. Because again, we need all the posts that the user made. And then we look up all the posts the user made with the user ID as well. And then our second .then statement is actually inside of our first one. And this is because we want the response from our axios.get request for the post IDs. We don't want to chain the .then statement on our first axios.delete statement. This is why we declare our .then statement, our second one, inside of our first .then statement. So our second .then statement is chained to axios.get /API/get/user post IDs instead of being changed to our first axios.delete statement. And again, we want the post IDs response from the server. This is why we're nesting our second .then statement. And inside of that .then statement, we do res arrow function res.data.map, because remember, it's an array of post IDs, so we have to do the map function. And for each post ID, we run a axios.delete statement. So if a user makes a post, other users can make comments on it. So when we delete the post that user we want to delete made, we also have to delete all the comments associated with that post. We can't just delete the post and then just have the comments just associated with nothing. So before we delete the actual post, we have to delete all the users' comments on that post, regardless of who made that comment. So we do this with .map, and we run a axios.delete call on each post to delete all the comments associated with that post. Our third .then statement actually then deletes the user posts. So once we've deleted all the comments associated with all the posts that our user made that we want to delete, we can just delete all the posts. And this is what we're doing in our third .then statement. We do axios.delete and then API/delete/user posts, and we use the user ID to look up those posts. Our fourth .then statement can then delete the user. And again, notice our fourth .then statement is inside of our third .then statement. Because why? Because before we delete the user, we have to make sure all the user's posts are deleted. This is why we chain our fourth .then call to our third axios.delete call and not to the main axios.delete user comments call. And you'll notice this because we indented our second and fourth .then call. This signifying that it's nested and not changed to the original axios.delete user comments call at the top. Then we just have our .catch error handling, and then we redirect the admin to our home page. So we're now done setting up our handle delete user function. And now let's go over why in the world are we even doing this. And we're doing this because of a PSQL concept known as a foreign key constraint. And I've referenced foreign key constraints and alluded to them in previous sections. And I'll break it down here and explain how it works. So remember when we set up our SQL table, we had a users table with the user's ID. We then used the user ID in the users table to reference the user ID in the post table. This means that the user ID in the post table is a foreign key, and a foreign key means a primary key in another table. So user ID is the same primary key in the users table, but it's just being referenced by the post table, which means it's a foreign key in the post table. So if we were to just delete a user that made a post, then what would that field in the post table be now referencing? Since we delete the user ID in the post table would be referencing nothing. So this is what a foreign key constraint is. We can't just delete users because it's being referenced by another table. So this is also why the first thing we delete are the comments the user made. Since even though the comments table is referencing both the user ID and post ID, the comments table itself is being referenced by nothing. It's on the bottom. It's referencing other tables, but it's being referenced by none of the tables, which is why we can just delete it without any foreign key constraint errors. There's no other table we have that's using the comments table column. So after deleting all the comments the user made that we want to delete, the user we want to delete made, you would think we can then just move up to our post table and then just delete all the posts that user made as well. And we can't do this because remember, even though the user we want to delete made posts, those posts may have comments from other users. So what do? We have to get all the post IDs the user made and then use those post IDs to look up all the comments in our comments table that are associated with that post. And then we have to delete those comments on those posts before we can actually delete the post associated with the user we want to delete. So this is what we do. We delete all the comments first associated with that post, and then we can delete the post. Then after we've deleted all the comments associated with the user and all the comments associated with all the posts the user made, we can then delete the posts all associated with that user. Then we can finally delete that user. So you might be thinking that this is just overly complex and there should be some hack or workaround to this. And who cares if the foreign key field is referencing nothing? And you have to understand this is done to ensure referential and data integrity. You can try to override it and find a workaround, but this is not recommended for the same reason mutating state directly is not recommended in React. It's an easy, short-sighted solution that might lead to problems and errors down the road. Especially when deleting data, it's best to be cautious and try to be as proper as possible. And I'll link a Stack Overflow answer in this resources section that goes over this in more detail. So let's go back to our app and finish setting it up. And we'll begin by setting up our dialog action. And again, we'll work smart and just copy and paste the code from our post.js component and then modify it. And we can also copy the table as well, since we'll be displaying the users in a table. So first thing, let's change the header of our table from search results to users. And we're going to be displaying users, so in our table body, let's change everything that's posts to users. So let's now work on our dialog box. So the first thing we'll do is change confirm delete to delete user. And then let's also change the content text to deleting user will delete all posts and comments made by user. And again, this will just let the admin know that deleting the user will not only delete the user, but also delete their posts and comments as well. And then in our delete button, we'll do handle delete user. And now we're done setting up the dialog box. Let's go set up the render user function. And we'll set it up the same way we did for render posts. We'll first pass in a parameter of user, and then we'll render each row separately. So let's do table row, and then each cell, let's first start off with a line break, and then display the username, and then on the next line, the user email. And then we'll also include a delete user button, which will, when clicked, activate the handle click open, and then pass in the user ID to local state. And then this user ID will then be used by the handle delete user function. And now let's begin setting up our Redux state. And we'll start with our map state props and map dispatch to props functions. So let's first set a property users, which will be an array of all of our users. This will be state.user reducer and then all users. And then we'll also need a action to save our users from our database to the Redux store. So let's do user success and then an arrow function users, and then pass in this argument to dispatch actions.getAllUsers. All right, and now we can set up the action types. So we'll do get all users and then remove all users. And now we can use these action types in our actions.js file. So let's go to the bottom and then create two new action creators, get all users and then remove all users. And remember to pass in a parameter of users and then also set it to the payload property of the get all users action creator. And let's now set up our user reducer, and we're not going to do anything fancy here, just the same thing we've been doing so far. So we'll need a empty array of all users, and then we'll set a case statement that will set action.payload to our all users property. All right, and let's now set up a route for this component. So in routes, let's import users from ./profile/users. And then for the path, we'll do /users. And again, we don't need to display each user, so we don't need a dynamic route. We'll just display all the users in one table. So this is why we'll just have a route called /users. And now let's also create a link for it in the header. So we're done setting up our front end and we can move to the server. So let's first set up our routes. So we'll first need to get all the users from our database. So let's do router.get/API/get/all-users. And the SQL query is going to be very simple. It's just select star from users. So select all the users. Then we need a route to delete the user comments. So we'll do router.delete/API/delete/user comments. And then we'll need the user ID to delete the comments. So our SQL query is going to be delete from comments, where user ID is the UID we're getting from our front end. So remember, the comments table has a column that has the user ID of the user that submitted that comment. So this is how we delete all the comments associated with the user. Next, we'll need the post IDs for all the posts the user submitted. So we'll do router.get/API/get user underscore post IDs. Then we'll need the user ID from our front end. And then the SQL query is going to be select PID from posts where user ID underscore equals our user ID from the front end. And this will give us all the post IDs. And again, we're not doing select star because we don't need all the post information. We just need the PIDs, the post IDs. And now these post IDs we just got from our database, we'll use it in our next router.delete function. So let's do router.delete/API/delete user post comments. This is how we delete the comments associated with all the posts. And again, refer back to when we were setting up our front end if you didn't watch that part and want to know why and how these routes are set up. So we first need the post ID. So it would be rec.body.postID. And then our SQL query is going to be delete from comments where post ID equals $1. So again, we're just deleting all the comments in the comments table where the post ID matches. And after deleting all the comments associated with the user posts, we can now delete the user post. So it will just be router.delete/API/delete/user posts. And we'll use a very basic SQL delete statement. We'll do delete from posts where user ID equals /1. So this will delete all the posts associated with the user. And after deleting all the user's posts, we can finally delete the user. So it will just be API/delete/user. Then we're getting our UID, the user ID from our front end. And then in our SQL query, it will just be delete from users where user ID equals our UID. And that's really it. That's all the routes we need to handle our admin users component. And let's also do one thing. Since these are mostly delete statements, let's just delete .rows from these router.delete calls. And we can actually leave .rows on our router.get all users request. And let's just also add a comma after all of our values in our pool.query function call. So let's now go back to our users component and see if everything's as it should be. And right away we see in our handle delete user, we need to pass in the data, the user ID, and our /delete/user post comments Axios delete call. So let's do that here. So that's really it. We can now begin testing our admin app. So the first thing we'll do, we'll actually create a user in our regular app. And then after creating that user, we'll submit a post with that user in our non-admin app as well. And then after that, we'll then log into our admin app, then edit and delete those posts and comments and delete the user as well. So let's do that. So to save time, I've already created a user called testadmin100@test.com. And as you can see from the login, this is my app 5. This is not the admin app. So let's go ahead and log in. So let's first add a post and we'll just type in admin user test. And let's also add a comment on another post. So let's just pick this one, TTT, and then GGGA for the body of this post. So remember that when we go to our admin app. All right, and let's just add in admin user test for the comment as well. So let's now go to our database and actually check to see if all these properties are present. So let's first select all from users, and we see at the bottom testadmin100@test.com is right there. So our user is in the database. And now let's check our post table. And yes, our post is right there, admin user test. And it's between post ID 63 and post ID 47. And now let's select all from comments. And yes, third one down, we have our admin user test comment. So great. So all of our data is saved in our database. So this will really let us know if our admin app is working or not. And remember, the admin app is a separate app with a separate login, but it connects to the same database. So let's log into that admin app now. So let's hit login, And as you can see, our login now has admin app 10. So this is now the admin app that we're logging in, and we're logging in with admin15@admin.com. Remember, this user is what we created on the Auth0 website. We can't sign up for the admin app. So let's first go to the forum, and yes, so we do see our admin user test posts, and also notice that these posts are not in cards as it were in our regular app. We're displaying the posts in a table. And here's our post as well, and it's on the TTT post with the GGGA body. And on our users component, we see our test admin 100 right here as well. So let's go ahead and delete this user, and we should see that the comment and post made by this user are automatically deleted as well. And our dialog box gives us this warning, as it should. So as you can see, our admin user test post is no longer here. It was deleted automatically. And let's check the comment. And yes, our comment is no longer here either. And to be completely sure, let's also check the database. So let's do select all from users. And we don't see it here. Our test admin 100 user is now deleted. And looking through the posts, no, it's not here either. Our admin user test post is gone, as it should be. And let's also select all from comments. And here either, we don't have it. It's been deleted along with the post and user. So great, our handle delete user function is working as intended. Perfect.